Good evening and welcome to the March 30th, 2021 special session of the Board of Education. I'm the board president, Melissa Ellis. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed live on AACPS's YouTube channel. If we are interrupted during the broadcast of this evening's meeting, the meeting will be stopped and we will take a short recess until we can continue. If for some reason we cannot continue, we will notify you as soon as possible when a new meeting will be scheduled. The board attorney has asked that I read the following statement. The Maryland Open Meetings Act, a state law, requires public meetings to be open to the public and to be held in places reasonably accessible to individuals who would like to attend these meetings. The limited public format of this meeting of the Board of Education is due to the COVID-19 emergency and is necessary in light of the serious health risks associated with public gatherings, as well as the governor's and county executives' various executive orders limiting public gatherings. Consistent with the Open Meetings Act, steps have been taken to ensure that this meeting includes alternate accessibility features that the Open Meetings Compliance Board and the courts have reviewed and approved, such as broadcasting the meeting with video and audio on cable TV and on the web, and allowing written public comment to agenda items to be filed with the board office and considered by the board. The board attorney has opined that the modified public access provided by this technology makes this virtual meeting reasonably accessible to the public and provides appropriate opportunity to observe the conduct of the board's public business consistent with prevailing best practices during this emergency situation, and therefore complies with the Open Meetings Act. As the legal and health parameters evolve, as reopening measures are implemented, this board will continue to review and revise our meeting procedures to balance our public business obligations with best safety practices. Please pause for the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. And now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we're on item 1.03 for tonight, establish agenda order.
Move to establish the agenda order.
Excuse me?
I move to establish the agenda order.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Consensus? No dissent? All right. The agenda has been established. And so now we are on public comments. We did receive, one moment, I'm toggling through my information here. We received 73 total public comments. 44 were received in advance of this evening's meeting, and they can be, those can be viewed online, and then there were 29 additional emailed into the board office. And so now we are on item 3.01, presentation of impact analysis of the new CDC distancing guidance on the spring 2021 reopening plan. And so I will turn it over to you, Dr. Arlato.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Madam President and members of the board, as always, for the opportunity. We continue to face the challenges of changed information as we go through this process of reopening. And yet again, we have been a week ago Friday, some additional information come out from the CDC and new guidance regarding the reopening of schools. And so we have spent a great deal of time analyzing that and seeing how it fits into our reopening plan, as well as talking to our colleagues around the state, as well as our local Department of Health and the Maryland Department of Health and the Maryland State Department of Education. So my plan briefly is to go through a fairly short presentation to lay the groundwork with regard to sort of the key components of what the CDC has outlined in new guidance with regard to reopening. I'm then going to transition into referencing the board's questions. Several of you submitted questions to the board office in advance. I received those Friday afternoon. And so I'm going to walk through those questions that the board had. And then from there, I'll open it up to the board's questions for further questions or clarification. If that suits your needs, President Ellis, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Great. Can I interrupt you for just a moment? And that sounds great. I should have taken roll call. I know at least one of our members was not able to join by video, but all members, I believe, are here. So let's just establish that. I'll start with Dr. Tobin.
Here.
Ms. Corkadell.
Here.
Ms. Antwine.
Here.
Mr. Silkworth.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Schalheim.
Here.
And Ms. Frank.
Here.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Arlotto. Now you can get started.
Fantastic. Thank you. So Bob is going to share his screen so that we're all looking at the same slides. And I'll go ahead and get started in that what most of the talk has been about, as you all well know, around the country, in the media, and here locally in Anne Arundel County, is the fact that the CDC has relaxed their guidance with regard to the distancing between students in the classroom. And so elementary schools, and they've divided that out from elementary schools and secondary schools. So I think you know that the elementary schools, the students can be or should be at least 3 feet apart in classrooms where everyone is masked, regardless of the level of community transmission. And of course, the thinking behind that, as you well know, is that our young students are not as susceptible to acquiring the virus or susceptible to the severity of illness as adults are. And so that guidance through research has moved from 6 feet distancing to 3 feet distancing. Again, as long as everyone is masked, which fits exactly where we are in Anne Arundel County, and regardless of community transmission. What then the CDC outlines also is that secondary schools, likewise, secondary school students can be 3 feet apart as long as everyone is masked, again, where that fits what we're doing with regard to our mitigation strategies, and where the transmission is low, moderate, or substantial. So you know that the CDC, you'll remember, has their own color coding system with regard to the metrics of community spread. And they have a low transmission rate, a moderate transmission rate, a substantial transmission rate, and then a high transmission rate. And that is color coded. So the secondary schools likewise can be at 3 feet apart as long as that transmission is low, moderate, or substantial. But they recommend that students should be 6 feet apart in the secondary schools. Again, when everyone's masked, when the transmission is high, and if cohorting is not possible. And so it's important for everyone to remember that cohorting is when students are kept together with their same peers and staff throughout the school day. You'll know that that's exactly how our elementaries are planned. So the students are in cohorts on Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday. And they also stay within that cohort for the day at the elementary level. At the secondary level, the degree to which we can cohort the students is at least putting them in cohorts for Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday, but they are not cohorted throughout the day. Our secondary students move from class to class, from first period to second period to third period, and so on. So they are not cohorted throughout the day. The CDC, on their website, they have a COVID tracking website where you can go to states and by county, and they will tell you on a week-to-week basis where that county lies with regard to their low, moderate, substantial, or high ranking. And currently, and since the guidance came out on the 19th, so that week and this past week up through the 26th, Anne Arundel County is still, and this is a This is a screenshot from today from their website that we are still currently in the high range with regard to community transmission as per the CDC. So the CDC also states that the change in distancing relates to the classroom, and you saw there primarily the elementary classroom. The 6-foot distancing requirements and recommendations and guidance still is in place throughout the school building and on school campus, and between adults and students. That has not changed. That guidance has not changed as a result of the latest release of the new reopening guidance from the CDC. And likewise, the CDC also recommends that people remain, students in particular, remain at 6-foot distance when their masks cannot be worn, such as when eating. That could also be a time if they're playing an instrument or singing, or there could be some other activity going on, but in particular, they mentioned when students are eating should be at least 6 feet apart. Again, the CDC, the recommendation, and we confirmed this through the Maryland Department of Health, as well as the Maryland Department of Education, that there is no change to the recommendation of distancing on school buses. So our bus capacity, right now we are at roughly 22 to 24 students per bus, depending on the age of the bus and the number of seats, but we will continue to transport students at 1 student per seat on the bus. So the 3 feet change in distancing between students does not include buses. One of the interesting things that the CDC guidance is silent on, and I was able to confirm this with our Maryland Department of Health, as well as our local Department of Health, is when it comes to contact tracing. So for those of you who are familiar with the contact tracing protocols, the current contact tracing protocols ask whether the person that is that could be considered a close contact of a positive case is within 6 feet of that positive case for 15 minutes or more during a 24-hour period. So when we are doing contact tracing within our schools, those are the basic questions that our contact tracers are asking. How long were you close to that positive case, whether it's an adult or a student? And one of the questions that we have posed is, with the distancing guidelines of students now sitting possibly 3 feet apart in an elementary classroom, will the contact tracing protocols change to meet that same guideline? Will they be reduced from 6 feet to 3 feet? And the answer is no. The contact tracing protocols, we're told by the Departments of Health, will remain at 6 feet. So here is just, and this is one of the concerns that we have, by bringing in a significant number of students into a classroom at 3 feet apart, that when contact tracing, if there is a positive case and the student is 3 feet apart or within 3 feet radius, you could have likely 8 close contacts to that positive case. At the 6 foot distance, and that's again if the guidelines were to change from 6 feet to 3 feet. But if they remain at the 6 feet, which we're told they are, then that will significantly increase the number of students that will have to go into quarantining, and adults possibly, but significantly increase the number of students that will have to go into quarantine. And we may very well, which we haven't had to do up to this point, but we may very well have to quarantine entire classes of students if there is a positive case. And you all have seen through the emails that you receive regularly from Mr. Mosier and those that are posted to our COVID website that we have had a significant increase in the number of positive cases in the past week and a half or so, 2 weeks, of both students and adults, as well as within the realm of athletics, that the number of positive cases has increased. The good news is that through contact tracing, that's not been occurring as a result of contacts in school. So the spread is not a result of students or staff being in school, but it is a reflection, and we knew this to be the case, it is a reflection of the community. So as the community case rate has been increasing in Anne Arundel County, where when we began at March 1st, I think we were roughly at around 15 cases per 100,000. We're now over 20 in Anne Arundel County, and that is reflecting in the increased number of positive cases of students and adults in our buildings. As a quick recap, and then I want to launch into the board's questions. The 3-foot distancing is primarily for elementary schools, and the middle school and the high schools are recommended to remain at 6 feet. The 3 feet distancing pertains only to within the classroom, and there's no change to the distancing on buses or throughout the school, including cafeterias, gymnasiums, and auditoriums. Lastly, there is no change in the contact tracing protocols. And so we do predict that we will see if significant increase in the number of students in a classroom will have an increased number of students being quarantined. One of the also key points for us is the ability of our food nutrition service staff to maintain their current meal service. Right now, our FNS staff is delivering meals in 3 ways. So they are delivering meals to students. Their students are picking up breakfast on their way into the school, taking it to their classroom and eating breakfast in the classroom. At lunchtime, the FNS staff is packing boxes of lunches and delivering them to each of the classrooms. And then the point of dinner is being picked up our students are picking up dinner on the way out of the building at the end of the day. Also keeping in mind that in between all of this, our FNS staff is still doing curbside service for all of our families that are at home, either 100% virtual or it is their at-home days in the hybrid model that they're still doing curbside service. So we have to keep a close eye on Ms. Reese and her team to ensure that they are being well supported. Unfortunately, we've had a couple of positive cases among the FNS staff. And so we do have a couple of schools that are have been significantly impacted by adults being quarantined because of either positive cases or they are close contacts with positive cases. One of the concerns we continue to have and talk about is supervision at the midday block, as well as instructional staff accommodations. We have a number of staff that have secured either a medical accommodation for themselves because of their own health, a medical accommodation because somebody they're caring for in their home, or they have secured a child care accommodation. And any one of those 3 or all 3 of those will limit our ability to expand the number of students. We'll get a chance to talk about that in a little bit, the number of students that we can have in buildings, because we, of course, need the instructional staff, both teachers, administrators, counselors, TAs, and others available as we possibly increase the number of students in our schools. So with that, I'm going to transition over to some of the board's questions. And let me pull those up. And let me go through those, and then I'll open it up to questions and clarifications for the board. So the first question was, how are we to solve the logistical issues surrounding lunch at all levels so that more children can be in the classroom? And the short answer is there is no easy way to solve that logistical issue of bringing students in and having them spaced 3 feet apart during the instructional time, and then having them 6 feet apart or more when they take their masks off to eat. We do know that, and you as the board are well aware, that we have not yet even reached capacity at 6 foot distancing in our classrooms and in our schools. We are roughly at about 37 to 40% of our students have chosen to come back to school in person in the hybrid model, which leaves us at 63 to 60% of those students. So the majority of our students are still accessing their instruction in 100% virtual model. So we still have room to add students and still remain at that 6-foot distancing or close there too. So we know that we can not only add students, but I think the 3-foot distancing guidelines of the CDC gives us a little bit of wiggle room where we can add not only students at 6-foot distancing, but probably get in a couple, 1, 2, 3 more desks per classroom, where we can most likely add some additional students and still be able to maintain what the CDC is recommending during that lunchtime of 6-foot distancing. But that will continue to remain a challenge. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well through some of the other questions. The next question, why can't the rest of the furniture return to the classrooms, even if unused, and utilize the cafeteria, gym, or auditoriums for socially distanced lunches, which is a wonderful question and certainly right on target. There are a couple of variables that are at play here. The first is we made a conscious decision to take out as much unneeded furniture in the classrooms as possible. And it wasn't so much that because the students wouldn't be sitting in those desks or utilizing that furniture, it was really to create adequate space for the students and adults to move throughout the classroom. So while we could certainly return desks, we would be creating very narrow aisleways and distancing around the water fountain or the pencil sharpener or the teacher's desk or the smartboard or whatever it might be. As you picture an elementary classroom in your mind, we certainly can return that unused furniture and take it out of the cafeterias or other places, hallways where it's being stored. Excuse me, not hallways, but in cafeterias and some other gym spaces where it's being stored. But again, we made the conscious decision to give the students as much breathing room, if you will, room to move about where they wouldn't be close to their peers. The other is, it's important to understand that the cafeterias and gyms and auditoriums, if available, are being used by adults during the school day. So when we have the midday break and students are eating lunch in their classroom, that teacher and all teachers have to be able to go somewhere to eat their lunch as well as do their planning. And we can't utilize the staff lounges anymore because they're just too small. You just can't get the staff into the staff lounge because they're just too small. So many of the schools, the principals worked out with their staff to set up stations within their cafeteria where the teachers can spread out and eat their lunch or do their planning and be appropriately distant from their colleagues who are doing the same thing at the same time. So those are a couple of variables that constrict our use of the cafeteria for student use during those lunch periods. The next question asks, can a 4-day in-person school week be established whenever possible based on space and logistics? In other words, must all schools either stay hybrid or transition to a 4-day in-person week? So there, again, as with anything, there are several variables that would impact this. One is certainly the number of students interested in returning to hybrid. We've got some schools that have very few students that have returned to hybrid, and therefore there is more room to grow and possibly combine cohorts, a Monday, Tuesday cohort, a Wednesday, Thursday cohort, to make a 4-day-a-week group, a new cohort, and bring those together. That certainly is a possibility, but that's in those schools that have very few students that have returned. We've got other schools that have a high number of students that have returned, and those cohorts on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are already full. And so there's no room to add. Also, to bring those students in, it's the availability of space on the buses. Again, we are left with no additional space on buses. We still have 1 child per seat. So to bring in additional students, we're limited by what we can do for those families that require and need transportation. And then, of course, the third big factor is to go from 2 days a week to 4 days a week, we have to have the staff available. So we have a number of staff members that are on an accommodation where, for instance, they may be in-person teaching on Monday and Tuesday, but their accommodation is to be at home on Thursday and Friday, well, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So that teacher would not be able to pick up additional Thursday, Friday cohort of classes as an example, to give you that example. And we have been working with our staffs, and as the board, in a motion of this board, early on when we introduced what the 1st of March was going to look like and our reopening plan, the board really coalesced, and there was a unanimous positive vote around a motion that asked me to work with teachers and staff and give them as much flexibility to telework as possible. So we have taken both the spirit and letter of that motion, and we've given teachers the ability to telework where we can. And so some of those numbers are increasing. So the availability of staff. So numbers of students available to allow us to go 4 days a week, availability of space on buses to transport those that need transportation, and the availability of teachers are all logistical obstacles that we would have to overcome to increase the number of days per week. We would also have to ask ourselves, based on how this question is worded, would we be okay with some schools or classrooms going 4 days a week and some just going 2 days a week? Is that the equity and equality that we are looking for, that we might be able to offer some students 4 days a week and others 2 days a week? And that's something that this board and this administration would have to wrestle with if we choose to go down that path. You do know that we are already working on, as soon as we get back from the Easter spring break, we'll begin to bring in some of those priority groups of students at 4 days a week. That will include, we'll begin with our special centers. We will then begin and expand that to our ED regional programs. We will then begin to offer that to our students in the autism clusters, the ACC classrooms, as well as 2 of our alternative programs, J. Albert Adams at Mary Moss Academy and the Phoenix Academy. And this is something this board has talked about on a number of occasions, as have I, that when we are able to expand our offerings, we want to focus first and foremost on those students that will have the greatest need. These are our students that believe have the greatest need for in-person instruction. So they'll be the first groups that will begin to offer to their families the 4 day a week model and build that. I think there's some lots of positivity around that with the administrators and the staffs in those buildings as they have begun to reach out to families to begin to plan for that and offer that as a possibility. Excuse me. Next question a board member submitted was, I assume we try to grow the number of students in buildings first via the 2 day model before opening up the 4 day model to students as opposed to serving those already in the hybrid to take advantage of the 4 day week first. And that's exactly it. And part of what, and I've mentioned this at board meetings in the past, and again, a little bit this evening, that our idea would be to, because we still have room to grow, even at 6 foot distancing in the cohorts that exist now in most classrooms, in most schools. That's not all. There are some schools that are at capacity at the 6 foot distance. But most schools and most classrooms do have room to add students now. So our thought would be first, and the visual would be that we will add students vertically in each of the cohorts. And then after we've added vertically and there are no more takers, then we can look at adding, we can begin to look at adding horizontally, meaning more days of the week. But we think it's important to offer our families, because what we've talked about up to this point has been 2 days, a hybrid model involving 2 days. And so we think it's important that for those families that still remain, and it's the majority of our students, still remain in the 100% virtual format, that we would give them an opportunity first to come into the 2-day format. Let's then see where the numbers are. And if we can then expand at schools or across the system, we certainly can take a look at that. But we think it's important to offer our families first the plan that we'd already built and they are thinking about, which is the 2-day-a-week model, and then build from there. Next question, let the individual schools address their own lunch challenges with some guidance from the Board of Ed. Certainly, we give our school principals and staffs a great deal of autonomy because they are brilliant. They know their school buildings, they know their students, they know their families much better than we do, certainly at Riva Road at the central office. There are some intricacies when serving meals that we have to be involved in because there are USDA, CDC, and MSDE guidelines around physically serving meals. And so we have to make sure that all of those laws and guidelines are followed very carefully. So there certainly has to be some input and guidance from central office. But many of the schools have worked out how they're able to not just deliver lunches, but really in the midday monitoring. They have worked with their PTAs, other local groups, and they have been able to really cover, for the most part, while we do have some issues, but cover for the most part the midday, with midday monitors, that midday break. And so they've been just phenomenal at working that out on an individual basis at their schools. Question is, if more students were in the classroom, then more desks would be out of the cafeterias and space issue would be resolved. Again, I spoke to that earlier. We certainly can move furniture from the storage areas like the cafeterias into the classrooms, but it will significantly decrease the ability of students and staff to move freely and keep an appropriate distance from each other when moving about the classrooms. But it's important to understand that some of these large spaces like cafeterias and gyms are being used by the schools for staff during their planning time and during their lunchtime to spread out from their colleagues because they can't access, say, the confines of their staff lounge, which they would normally during those times. Likewise, a question expands the gym in many schools is also being unused. How about eating in the gym? So gyms are being used more and more, but again, eating in the gyms, we certainly could spread out a class or two within a gym, say to sit down and eat lunch, but that would not accommodate in all classrooms because they're all eating at the same time. And so that creates a bit of an issue because if we wouldn't have enough space to spread all the students out and still give them 6-foot distancing within each of their classrooms. So that does create a bit of a conundrum for us. There's a question about plexiglass, and this is interesting because it says, and the question is, why not put plexiglass around the children's desks? So that was something that was discussed early on. There were school districts around the country that utilized it. Interestingly enough, if you read carefully the new guidance of the CDC, the guidance has completely removed all reference to plexiglass. That's because the data is showing that it doesn't work in terms of curbing spread within a school. Certainly if it's an immediate close contact, like a visitor coming into the school and speaking with a front office secretary, we're going to continue to maintain plexiglass there because it's sort of a close contact of that person. But the CDC has actually removed all reference to plexiglass from their updated reopening guidance. There's talk about students eating in shifts, and this is part of why I referenced when talking about the gyms. By having the students eat in shifts, that means, let's say half the class could stay in the classroom and eat at 6-foot distancing. That means the other half have to go somewhere else. And the difficulty is where is that somewhere else? Because it's not just one classroom, but remember, all of our students are eating at the same time during this midday break. And we did that purposely so that we could have lunches served to the students that are virtual or home in the hybrid model. So that creates, we wouldn't have enough adults to watch those students that are eating in shifts that are not in that classroom. There's a question about using storage pods to storage for unused furniture. Again, certainly can be done. We could, if available, we certainly could contract, write a contract and look for storage pods to store furniture. That would certainly empty out the cafeteria or gym. But again, many of those spaces are being used by adults during that time. But certainly the use of storage pods is something that we can look at further. Likewise, there was a suggestion or a question about providing tents for outdoor eating. Certainly something that we could do. We could look into contracting for tents. I would suspect that there is a pretty tight market for that right now because lots of different people, including restaurants, are utilizing the tents that are available, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't look for and contract with a vendor or vendors to provide tents. Again, this would require additional adults. So you'd have adults having to watch students in the class during the midday break, but also those that go out to the tent to eat, we'd have to have adults there as well. So we'd have to, that would be a bit of an issue to overcome. Certainly we'd have to identify funding, but I think we could work through that. I'd be a little worried about as we get into the spring season and storms and weather, also how we would be able to secure the tents, chairs, desks, tables that would be in those tents overnight to make sure that they're safe and ready for appropriate use on each day. We also, when there are guidelines with regard to spaces outside of classrooms where students are, so we have to make sure that we have electrical hookups, and we would have to have the PA system run out there for safety and security reasons. All things that we could work through if we felt that acquiring tents for outdoor eating was something we wanted to focus on. There's a question about the number of students that remain on wait lists. We have moved a significant number of students off the wait lists, and I met with all of the principals last week and gave them the green light to start to clear their wait lists. Said between then last week and us beginning the Easter spring break that as they see fit with the number of seats available and the access to transportation, that those students that they can fit in their buildings, even at the 6-foot distancing, they should clear their students from their wait lists. I believe the number now is that we have roughly 140 students that are still on wait lists across all schools. In addition to that, how many hybrid enrollees previously signed up for self-transport now require bus transportation and are on the wait list? I think the majority, I don't have a specific number of that. I think the majority of students, that 140 that are on wait lists, are fall into one of two categories. Either they are pending a transportation, so that takes several days to a week to check the route, check the buses, and make sure there's room on that route or on that bus for that student. Or it's students that are on a wait list for schools that currently don't have additional space. But I think many of those are transportation issues that the transportation department is working through on a feverish pitch so that we can bring as many students off the wait lists as possible. Next question, if when we open a new registration opportunity for more students to engage in hybrid, what is our estimated number of additional students that we will be enrolling? So good question. Don't know. Again, we're currently at 37 to 40% of our families that have picked to join the hybrid. We still have room, again, at most schools, in most classrooms, not all, some are full, some are at capacity, but we do have room to grow. So our plan would be clear the wait lists, and then, as this question suggests, then ask our parents one more time, you're currently, whatever state you're in, either hybrid or virtual, if you're currently virtual and you see that the landscape has changed, you see what's happening in the classroom, you understand the safety protocols and mitigation strategies that are in place, maybe you feel better that all staff has gotten their second dose of the vaccine, you feel better about sending your child back to school. Whatever those reasons may be that a parent chose to keep their children home or child home, but we would want to give them that opportunity to now pick the hybrid model. We would then give them the opportunity to pick the hybrid model 2 days a week, based then on how many parents do make that change. Then we could possibly look at moving, as I said, from vertically to horizontally and including more days as a possibility. And recognizing the next question, that there are unique barriers for some families that are hindering or limiting their choice to send their students back to hybrid. What elements of our plan strategies are noteworthy in solving some of those issues and causing those barriers? So those are the barriers I just spoke to. There's a number of reasons why parents have picked to keep their children or child at home. Again, it could be a medical condition of the child. It could be a medical condition of somebody that the child is living with at home. It could be childcare that the parent doesn't have access, or they've worked out childcare because of their own circumstance, and they don't want to disrupt that. And so there are a number of reasons why adults not being vaccinated early on, and now they are. There are a number of reasons that our families have chosen that. So one of the things that, in answering this question, one of our strategies is that we are post the Easter spring break, will be increasing access to tutoring, particularly for our middle and high school levels. We have that tutoring going on now, but we want to increase that access and really target students. So instead of maybe just a call in where lots of students get physics help, it might be a physics teacher that focuses on just a couple of students at that high school level or at the 8th grade math level, and really target students that are not being successful, and see if that's still in the fully virtual model, and see if we can target them through some additional tutoring. And there was a question about hiring. There are a few staff and contractor positions that we continue to try to hire more of and alleviate some of the challenges that hybrid learning has created logistically, operationally, and with transportation services and so on. And so asked for an update. So we have hired and placed 621 midday monitors, which is extraordinary. Just so proud of the team. We have 41 in the post-fingerprinting vetting process. As you know, we have a 20-day, because of the Maryland law, we have a 20-day process of doing background checks on anybody that we hired has contact with students. So we've got 41 of those now that have gone through fingerprinting, and they're in that vetting process. And we have another 52 have been offered opportunities, but have yet to be fingerprinted. So there's another 52 that have cleared that process. We've invited them to join us as midday monitors, and they have not gone through officially the fingerprinting process. So we still have, the good news is we've hired many, and we still have many that are in the pipeline, but we still need to continue to hire more. We still have 114 midday monitoring slots currently covered by central office staff. And this is certainly before we add any 4 days a week. We're still at 2 days a week with those cohorts. And so the principals, our PTAs, our partner organizations are still continuing to recruit for midday monitors and doing a great job. But we still have, again, those 114 midday monitoring positions around the county, and they're being covered in a variety of different ways, and particularly through the central office staff is going out each day and has a classroom that they are overseeing during that midday to give those teachers the appropriate lunchtime and planning time. And if you weren't aware that we've always had long-term substitutes in the school system. knowing that substitutes would be a bigger issue in this virtual and now hybrid environment, we have given each school the ability to hire 3 additional long-term substitute teachers that they can have on their staffs. Not all these positions have been filled, but we've given each school the ability to hire 3 more long-term subs that they can have on their staffing role. So I think up to this time, we've placed 309 long-term subs in 114 schools. And we have, I think that, and we do have some TAs, a number of TAs that are also helping cover with long-term sub coverage. We have recruited 174 bus drivers and have fully processed, trained, and placed 57 of those who are currently driving routes. And in recent conversations with the Arundel County Department of Health is currently recruiting and hiring. They have a need for 10 nurses, 10 RNs for our schools, and 23 health assistants and 3 nursing supervisors, all needed for AACPS. Those are current vacancies that we are working with our Anne Arundel County Department of Health as they're looking to hire and secure those folks. And let's see. And lastly, how many of the initial 800-ish elementary wait-listed students are now back in school, or how many more elementary students have we returned to in-person learning following the initial return from the first week, which was March 1st? So of the initial 800, which turned into almost 1,000 elementary students who wanted to return to in-person learning, we've returned approximately 80% of them to the schools 2 days a week. And so there were, since the first, there were, I think the number is 993 students added to the hybrid role. So they were virtual. And as of March 1st, 993 moved over to the hybrid. But we also had hybrid students move back to fully virtual. And so we had a little over 300 students move from the hybrid model and back to the fully virtual model. And so our overall net gain was 681 new hybrid learners since that first week of reopening, since that week of March 1st. 681 when you balance those newly introduced and those that went back to fully virtual, 681. So as of today, we have 15,799 elementary hybrid students in one of the cohorts, one of 2 cohorts, Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. And so with that, I am going to take a sip of iced tea and glad to take questions, and I'll leave that to you, President Ellis.
All righty. So we're going to do a round of questions. We just did 1 round of questions. Board members were invited to submit their questions ahead of time. So we're going to try to knock this out with 1 round of questions. I want to remind everyone that we're sticking to the topic of the impact or the impact the new CDC guidelines have on our spring reopening. So this is not a full reopening report where you might ask questions about things like graduation or something like that. That will be, we'll address more of the expanded topic in our board meeting next week. So with that, we start with Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. Thank you, President Ellis. And thank you, Dr. Arlotto, for that presentation. It was very helpful, and you anticipated a lot of additional questions I had, so thank you. But a couple of things I wanted to ask, 2 questions. The first question I wanted to ask is about the impact of these guidelines and therefore the potential for increase in hybrid students, either vertically or ultimately horizontally, as you put it, on our current fully virtual students. And the reason, what I'm asking, and the reason I'm asking, is that, as you noted, we have a majority of our students still in fully virtual. And I'm aware of, certainly in my district and others, families for whom hybrid is not a rational choice because of the danger to the family, either the very crowded living conditions of the family, high infection rate in their particular community, parents, breadwinners who work hourly jobs who can't risk being out of work because they're ill, and possibly no health insurance. And those often are the same students who are our most vulnerable students to begin with, for whom virtual may not be the best option, but is for that family the only option. And so I want to understand a little better what you think the impact would be if we were to bring more students into hybrid, with regard to the teachers having to juggle, as they are right now, the virtual and the hybrid, and continue that with more and more students potentially in hybrid.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. It's so we will, let me go back to what I've stated a number of times. We want to bring back as many students that want to return to in-person, that we can do so in a safe and healthy manner, and follow all the guidance that we have been given from the health experts. And so where we think where we can increase, we want to do that and offer families that opportunity. It does present challenges on a number of different fronts, because, as you say, there are a number of different reasons why families have chosen to keep their child at home. Likewise, there is a reason why some families have chosen to allow their child to return 2 days a week. And I've heard from some parents, of course, that are saying, we need to open 5 days a week, or at least 4 days a week, and that should happen tomorrow, right? And I completely get that and understand that. But I've got some other families that are saying, I chose 2 days a week because it was going to be small classes, right? It was only going to be 8 or 10 students, and I was comfortable with them being spread out and being in a classroom with their teacher and their classmates just 2 days a week because of mitigation strategies and to reduce risk. If you now, Dr. Arlotto, fill up that classroom with many more students, I might just reverse my decision. Right? That's going to make me uncomfortable, the parent, I'm speaking of. By now you're saying it went from 8 students to 16 or 20 students, and they're back to being, they're 3 feet apart, at least. That makes me nervous. And so I think that has an impact as well. But you mentioned the teacher, and the teacher having to juggle these two worlds, the hybrid world, the students in front of them and the virtual students. I think one of the things that has made it, what's the word I'm looking for? That's made it, I don't want to see easier, because that's just not appropriate. None of this is easy for our teachers. But what's made it more manageable in learning this new pedagogy, this new system, is that the numbers in the classroom have been fairly small. So that's easier to manage for the teacher. It doesn't make it any easier because you're also managing a group of students online. I get that. But your point is, if more students would return, what's the impact, I think your question is. And I think that would become more difficult for teachers because you've got those students. One thing, again, that I think has been more manageable, I want to say easier, but more manageable, is the numbers have been fairly small. And they've been able to work with those students that are face-to-face that they have in the classroom. If that answers your question.
Yes, that does answer my question. And as I was saying, unfortunately, for some of our families, there was no choice in this. I mean, they basically had to choose between their children's education and the survival of the family, which is a choice nobody wants to ever have to make. But unfortunately, many of our families had to make that choice. My second question, and you referenced this, but I want to make sure I'm clear. And you and I have discussed this. I've brought it up in board meetings before, and I support what you say, that as you've always said, and as the staff has always said, we have these targeted high needs groups that need in-person learning, special centers, English language learners, et cetera, et cetera. I do want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, that you would not consider expanding hybrid to, say, 4 days a week for anybody who wants it, or whatever other possibility may emerge, in any way that would put at risk those students, those targeted groups, being able to be in person 4 days a week. If, you know, as you said, we're beginning to offer, because in my mind, that has to be our first priority, those students with the greatest need. So I just want to make sure I understood what you're saying about that.
Yes, ma'am, that's exactly right. Again, I think we have an obligation to offer our families an ability to come in those 2 days a week if they now, their family landscape or the landscape of COVID has changed, that they feel now comfortable sending their child. And absolutely, those small priority groups that I've mentioned, we focused on them in the fall, and we're able to bring them back to some degree in a hybrid format. And that also included the CATs. But we're not talking about expanding CATs to 4 days a week because their programming is only 2 days a week anyway, right? So we're not talking about bringing them in now, doubling their time, because their time at the CAT center is 2 days a week anyway. But your point is a good one, that the plan would be to expand those to 4 days a week, those students that we feel need it the most first, those priority groups. I think the next group that we would then look at for 4 days a week, Dr. Tobin, would be those students that are in the regular programming, right? They're not in part of the ACC or the autism or the special centers or ED or alternative. They're in the regular ed programs, including some of our IEP students, and possibly expanding them to 4 days a week, right? So that would be the next in progression. Let's get the small priority groups, special needs students, in the first 4 days a week. Then look at those next group of students who are simply not doing well in the current environment that they're in, and say, let's bring you in 4 days a week. And this goes to your point, I think, and I was a little long-winded, so I apologize. That if we expand, if we open up everybody to 4 days a week, we may very well box out the students that need it the most. And I want to be able to do this in a progression, in a thoughtful manner that we're targeting. And this is something this board has talked about for months and months and months and months. Back in the fall, this board was talking about, hey, how do we focus on the students that need it the most when we're able to bring students back into the building? And so I think that's an important piece, is that we want to build this first, those priority groups of special needs students. And then the next, this is something I met with all of the principals last week. I think I mentioned that in my previous comments. I had the opportunity to meet with all the principals. We went over a number of things, but this very point is something I made to them. I said, you should be identifying now, which of course they already know who they are, but I said, identify those students that could really benefit from being in school 4 days a week. Not the special needs groups necessarily, but the students that are struggling. It could be an IEP student. It could be a student that, because of whatever's happening and it's an attendance issue, and if we invite them in 4 days a week, they'll show up 4 days a week. And I said, identify them now so that when we get to a place where we can expand to 4 days a week, we know who they are and we can invite them in. That's in a progression where we're headed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was very helpful, Dr. Alotto.
Ms. Corkadell?
Thank you, President Ellis, and thank you to the staff and everybody for doing such a great, outstanding job. We're almost done with our vaccine clinic, and that is definitely noteworthy. We have what, one more week after this week?
Yes, ma'am. We have so no vaccine clinic this week.
Yeah.
Because of the holiday week, but the week after we will have our last clinic, which will be the last of the second doses. It will be a large clinic. It could be very well over 2,000 being vaccinated, but that will be our last. It's just been so thank you. I'm just going to take a quick second. As you did, the staff has done an amazing job. An incredible group of volunteers week in and week out. And of course, the fire department has been nothing but spectacular. So thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah, I think we'd be remiss not to. Dr. Alotto, I had a question as it relates to some of the options that were talked about through the question and answer phase. And I do not have an elementary student, so I'm not as tapped into the details and the implications on the scheduling, but they do have a recess time, correct? And so if they have a recess time, and we used to have them having lunch at different times a day when they were actually in the building. I'm just wondering if I don't know if it's a question or just a consideration that I'd greatly appreciate some feedback on, of the idea of splitting the class of recess and lunch. So you're actually kind of balancing that in between, so that because there's 1 and 1 of each. And so there would be an opportunity, like the people getting recess aren't, even though they're waiting a little longer for lunch, you're still getting the break, and vice versa. The ones that I think there may be, I'm just wondering if we had all those other things in place or had the ability to place them, could you provide maybe a little feedback on something like that would work? I mean, and to predicate, I know that we would, of course, have to have more space, for the rainy days and for the other things, and as well as the hiring. And I think that's probably the biggest barrier in the room would be the hiring of the additional staff, because you would basically be doubling our midday. But recognizing all that, if you could just share some pros, cons beyond what I'm thinking about that in that type of scenario.
Right.
Not that the board should be in that level of weeds, but I think we did bring up in some questions how that could look. Not that the board should be saying you should do that, but I'm wondering in those scenarios how that would look.
Yes, ma'am. No, it's a good thought, and I think you hit the nail on the head. We would have to double the number of adults, right? So that midday monitor is with those students as they're eating their lunch, and then can transition them to recess. So we would need additional adults. I know the team has talked about this. So I'll ask Dr. McMahon if you've got something else to share with regard to Mrs. Corkadell's question about the possibility of taking those students and splitting the class. Again, her suggestion is and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but half the students eating while the other half are at recess, and then they can flip-flop. And that gives a chance to spread them out and give them that 6-foot distancing when eating is, I believe, her point.
Right. That's a great question, Mrs. Corcadella. And we really did look into that because we were thinking that might be an answer. But what we came across is the fact that we need to keep these students remaining relatively in cohorts so that they can return back to their classrooms. So we have an adult that has to watch students. And while that adult could watch students in shifts, that's not a problem. When the students go outside, relatively speaking, you have to keep your eyes on, the 12 to 15. And so the other 12 to 15 are back in the classroom, another adult's watching those. So no matter which way we played, we couldn't save ourselves the duplication of adults, the need for twice as many adults, and more than one or two savings here or there when you're watching students, because we need not just to watch them, but to engage with them, especially the little ones, if they have needs while they're playing in recess. So it's a great question you're asking. It's just a challenge that was bigger than we actually initially thought it would be. And so we're back to where we started with the one adult for the student per student cohort group.
So it sounds like in theory, if we could have this mass hiring and people would just start showing up to apply and we could accelerate some background checks, we could actually probably pull something like that off, because that seems like the cleanest and cleanest way. And my small little elementary school used to do stuff like splits all the time. So that's where I got the idea. But I did have a second question as well. So Dr. Tobin had mentioned our vulnerable population groups, and some have multiple vulnerabilities coexisting, and others very targeted and focused. I know that they've had great success, regardless of how we're landing in the return to hybrid versus staying virtual, because those are still family decisions. And our offer of choice does not limit those decisions for any of those members. But I do know that on many of the social services, as well as our vaccine efforts, because those vulnerable families are often more hesitant to take the vaccine, for example. Could you explain, maybe, I know you guys were in discussion and have been and started to implement some more intimate counselor services and PPW services to them. Could you explain a little bit more? Because it seems like that door-to-door approach, I mean, literally the churches knocked on the door and said, hey, come, and had a person who got the vaccine, right? And so we know that those conversations and those more intimate targeting of certain communities who may have unique questions or barriers that need kind of fleshed out in a more intimate discussion than we are talking about the broader. Could you give us an update on some progress of that? Ms. Jackson, you may be able to also share some things about how we are engaging, because yes, I think they weigh heavy on all of our conscience. And you often feel like, I wish I could do more. So maybe we could talk about what we are doing and plan on doing. And I think that may help us better understand some of these nuances of the hybrid and the return and the registration numbers we saw, quite frankly.
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Corkdale. And I'm going to let Mrs. Jackson speak to those student support services as they're under her leadership. But as you know, and you helped coordinate, we had a nice turnout of folks several weeks ago for a town hall conversation around mental health supports, not just within the school system, but across the county, and really introducing families to those supports that exist, again, here in AACPS, as well as throughout the county. And I think it was well attended and certainly well worth our time and efforts in introducing, as you are saying, making sure families know that they can access the supports that are there. And so I'll leave it to Mrs. Jackson talk a little bit about some of the work in student services.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to continue to serve our students in this capacity. I think you are absolutely correct, Ms. Corkadell, that our students are being served in a different manner. We continue to add services as we are becoming more comfortable with in-person interaction with our families. And I want to reiterate that word, families. So Anne Arundel County Public Schools throughout the pandemic has not just supported our students, but our families. And one way in which we do that, as you know, Ms. Corkadell very well, is every other week I meet, as well as you do, with the Anne Arundel County Partnership with Youth Services so that we can continue to, I think one of the good things that have come from this collaborative effort is our relationship with the Anne Arundel County government. And so through that, we have increased our collaboration and therefore our services, both food, mental health, support, internet, all of those things we talk about every other Friday. So thank you to you and that team for that collaboration. And then finally, you talked a little bit about the equity, and I was asked to join as the representative for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, the Anne Arundel Health Equity Committee, and we meet on a regular basis and we talk about just those things that you're talking about. Access, helping, again, it's that collaborative effort. At many of our meal sites, you will see other people from the county offices. We've collaborated with our partners such as the community college and the libraries to get all of that information out about vaccinations, about testing. Testing hasn't gone away, right? Just because vaccinations are here doesn't mean that testing goes away. And so we continue to help our citizens with testing, as well as some of the financial needs that they're having, as well as opening up our school our school campuses on Saturdays to some of those drive-through food banks. So we continue to support families in that way, and we will continue to do that both in person and virtually. And I think that's important to note, that we have to do the robust support for the students that are in person, as well as those that are virtual, who, as Dr. Tobin mentioned, there is a real need to help families who do have some sort of an issue to overcome with in-person instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I so greatly appreciate that, and Dr. Lotto, because some of these, the COVID is not an equitable crisis. It has affected in such disproportionate measures. We still have an obligation to move forward and always, I'm a big proponent of providing as many choices as possible. And so I want to thank you and thank just take a second to thank our partners too, because these groups that have been convening have overcome many obstacles in very unique, think outside of the box ways, quietly in the background. I mean, all of our food pantry services are all coordinated by 78 folks, majority through the partnership with Dr. Brown's group, and they're not getting the thank you, the accolades, or anything, even alongside our food service workers that we often recognize here. So it's good to hear that. I think that as we continue to proceed, everybody is coming together, regardless of what that decision is, and making the best situation and continuing to reach out. But we're going to have to continue that reach out. And I just hope that our communities recognize the role that they need to play to support us in our efforts and support their fellow neighbors, because we need all hands on deck for that. So thank you very much. I have no further questions, Ms. Ellis, and greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Andrews.
Thank you, President Ellis. And Dr. Lotto, thank you for another informative presentation. my question is, how many days of school do we have left to do what is being planned?
I don't know, Mrs. Antwine. I'll see if I can get somebody to count on the calendar for you. It's a good question. I just don't. I don't know exactly how many days we have left in the school year.
Does it help to know the fourth marking period starts April 15th?
Yeah, I'm looking at when the new marking period starts, and then I'm hearing the incremental effects. So I'm trying to design an estimated timeline in my head based on the time that we have left. So my other question would be, of course, I'm focused on education. I believe education is pivotal despite all that's going on, and the students, parents, and otherwise are proving daily that they are performing much better in person in many, many cases than they are virtually. So could we work some things in parallel? For example, giving that second chance to those that may not have opted for a hybrid choice before, but feel it would be more beneficial now. Could we do that at this point in time so we can, in terms of the time and the time constraints, we would have the ability to successfully figure out what our next steps are and how soon those steps should be taken?
So I want to, I believe I understand the question. Let me try and respond first. As my team is amazing, there are 54 days remaining in the school year and student days left in the school year, 54. I believe your question, Miss Antwine, is can we add more students to the hybrid roles? Is that your question, that those that are currently fully virtual, can we add them to the hybrid roles?
What I heard earlier in your presentation and based on some of the questions put before you a few minutes ago, it was a dependency factor. Once we do this, then we would do that. And I am trying to understand what we can do simultaneously. What can we do at the same time? For example, if a student is failing, could that specific student not be offered now to come back in, or is it more beneficial to focus on a targeted set of students before the focus on that student that is failing educationally comes in?
Okay, so we are doing things simultaneously. So we've asked the principals to clear their wait lists. So that's happening. They are contacting families and saying, if you want to move from virtual to hybrid, and they have space either in the bus, in the classroom, or both. So that is happening simultaneously. We are focusing on those special needs students, ED regional programs, special centers, and the like, and we're contacting them simultaneously to begin to expand them to 4 days a week. Then we'll focus on those other students that I mentioned and that I think you're referencing that are not being successful in their current environment, and begin to offer them possibly 4 days a week.
Excellent. And then that set of students that may be doing well, but it's only they feel because they are meeting in person that these improvements are occurring. Could they make a case to come back in 4 days a week?
So that's the struggle. The struggle is opening it up to all students 4 days a week is exactly the struggle that we've been talking about, that we have distancing barriers that we would have to overcome, transportation barriers that we would have to overcome, because we can still only transport the same number, 22 to 24 students on a bus. If we then, for example, just using that one example in transportation, open it up and say, okay, anybody that wants to come back 4 days a week, you can do that. we won't be able to transport them. And so appropriately. So that's the reason we wanted to build incrementally and possibly get to that 4 days a week for those priority groups of students.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Arlotto. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Silkworth.
Thank you, President Ellis. I'd like to thank, of course, Dr. Arlotto for his presentation. I wanted to mention just a couple things, and I had maybe one question. The mission of the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County is to provide leadership, vision, and support to Anne Arundel County Public Schools that ensures an equitable, world-class education and creates a lifelong learning by promoting community collaboration, developing responsive policies, and holding ourselves accountable to the results. So I wanted to focus a little bit on the promoting community collaboration. We're all getting lots and lots of emails, and I thought about 3 C words. Can anybody think of 3 C words? One of them is consistency. One of them is change. One of them is clarity. Now, if I give you guys a quiz, which one of them would be the bad word? Some people would say that it's change. We're getting a lot of emails from people that are talking about change. We don't need more change. They're also saying we do need consistency. That's clear. But they're also talking about the need that they have to make sure that the mental well-being of their children is what it needs to be. We're all concerned about the stress levels of our students, and we're also, of course, concerned about the stress levels of our staff. So having said that, the word clarity. So my question, I guess, Dr. Arlotto, would be, actually I had 2, but you've pretty much answered the first one, because the first one was something like, what would you think would be one of the wisest courses of action for the rest of the school year based upon the missions that we have? You've pretty much outlined that, I believe. And so in terms of clarity and also in terms of collaboration, should we reach out at some point in time soon to all of our stakeholders to see what they think about currently where we are and where we should go?
It's oh, I had to make sure I was off mute. It's certainly something we can do. I guess the question I would ask, without thinking too deeply, Mr. Silkworth, is to what end, right? I want to, if we're going to survey people, and I like to do that because I like to hear directly from folks, but what are the questions we want to ask, and then to what end do we anticipate using that information? Because one of the things that I think you are hearing loud and clear from most, if not all stakeholders, is we want to open the school year, next school year, in as normal or regular a process as we can, right? Our plan, and we are focusing on building that so that we can bring back all of our students 5 days a week. If we can get back to that, I think that's a real focus for many folks. Again, there are many, as you have said, that are asking for no change, and we've gotten into a routine as a family. We've got daycare or childcare taken care of, and things are working, right? And then there are others that are saying, it's not working for my child. My child needs to be in 4 days, if not 5 days a week. There are others, as we've talked about this evening, that are saying, regardless of what you're doing, I've got to keep my child at home for their safety, safety of my family or others. So there's no easy answer to any of this. I don't know that we could make a decision, make everybody happy, but I'll go back to, if we're going to survey folks, what is it that we're asking and what do we intend to do with that information? Because I think people want to answer a survey, but they also want to know that it's actionable. What are we going to do with the information?
Great, thank you. I was a little surprised a few minutes ago when the question was asked about the number of days left, and Drake didn't chime in, the senior there. I would have thought he would have come out and he would have known it right away.
These
Well, as you
are
know,
fewer.
Mr. Silkworth, a senior's days and everybody else's days are very different.
And speaking of, oh, sorry, go ahead. You still going?
Well, President Ellis, I do thank you for the opportunity that we've all had this evening. I think the word about clarity, I think there has been a good bit of clarity that has been shown this evening in terms of where we are and where we think we need to go for the benefit of our kids. So thank you so much.
And Mr. Smith.
Don't worry, I'm counting. But thank you, Dr. Arlotto, for your presentation. And I guess my question is, well, not a question, just for clarity. So we already kind of put it out there or advertised to parents that if you originally pick that you're going to remain hybrid, that you can get on a wait list. I mean, remain virtual. You can get on a wait list to become a hybrid, correct? And that was, you said it was like 800 folks. And we got it down to now we only have about 140 students countywide still on that wait list, right? So
yes, it happened. It happened organically. So meaning that people chose either virtual or hybrid when we began to reopen schools for March 1st. Then as the hybrid, as one day turned into two, turned into a week, turned into 2 weeks, organically families began to then request of their schools, hey, my child would like to make a switch, right? So many times it was literally the child who was at home virtually, saw their classmates on the screen inside their classroom with their teacher and said, hey, I want to be part of that. And so it very much happened organically that those families began to make those requests of principals work with them in transportation to make it occur. And we're currently at now down to 140, as you say, that are on that wait list.
And I guess in your, I don't know, best estimate is probably a loaded question, but do you think if we were to put another survey out to families that said, I mean, do you think we get an increase in parents that say they would want to return hybrid, just hybrid, not, just 2 days a week?
Yes. So this is a question we are wrestling with, Mr. Smith. So yes, I believe if we gave parents another opportunity, I think many families, obviously over 800, have taken advantage of that possible move and gone through that process. There may very well be some more that didn't know that was an option. And that's the reason that I am sort of keen on putting to use your word, a survey out, because these 800 may be sort of families in the know and push the envelope a little bit. There may be families out there that do want to make a change. They didn't know that was a possibility. So I want to give them that ample opportunity to choose hybrid if they want to. Now, the other side of that coin is, Mr. Smith, as you probably know, and it may be some of your classmates, while we've got some students that are going from virtual to hybrid, we've got some that are going from hybrid back to virtual. And so we have seen that trend, particularly at the high school level, and high school seniors who have chosen, they thought they wanted the hybrid, wasn't working for them, and they've gone back to fully virtual.
No, you're absolutely right. I actually have a friend like that, after the first week, he said, this isn't for me. And I said, it's only been a week, but, to each their own. But now to my real question, I guess, where applicable, could we do a lottery for 4 days a week, right? So at first we pinpoint all the priority groups of students in that school, right? And we say, okay, all the priority groups will be coming in 4 days a week, and we have an X amount of slots open to, have, I guess, the other students come in 4 days a week. And we're going to put it up to a lottery for students that are already in the hybrid environment. Has any thought been put into like a lottery of that?
So I haven't put any time or thought into a lottery. My initial concern, and I'll certainly talk it over with my team, Mr. Smith, is that if you go to a lottery, there are some that win the lottery, to use that terminology, and some that don't. And I'd rather target the students for use of the 4 days. But I also don't see, we would put an extended burden, I believe, on teachers if teachers now have some students that are only 2 days a week and some of those students that are 4 days a week. It really needs to be all of those students in that cohort are 4 days a week. If we go to that, either they remain 2 days a week or we extend that whole cohort to 4 days a week.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. And that's why I said, where, applicable, where we have, I guess, a smaller amount of students returning, hybrid, and, I guess they have that leeway to do a lottery. Just because I think people's goals is just, where we can do it safely and effectively. I think, that's what they want, instead of just doing like, a blanket statement and just, I don't know. But I think that answers my question. I mean, it literally just popped in my head as you were, answering the questions, because, I just thought, we do lotteries for all, for the magnet programs and for some of the charter schools. So I just thought, but thank you for your answer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I believe we're at Ms. Schalheim. Am I right about that?
Yes. Firstly, thank you, Dr. Arlotto, for your presentation, and to your team for their efforts. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say Hag Pesach Sameach to those who celebrate, and happy almost Easter to those who celebrate. I have a question about the 140 students on wait lists, because I represent a district where a huge percentage of kids in most schools went back. Can you tell me if you see any trends in that number? Are they mostly focused on particular clusters, and how many of that 140 are seniors or juniors? And do you have that information?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay, I would love that if you can get that for me, and thank you in advance for that.
And I'm sorry, so can you be a little, you
I trail off a little bit? Is my audio bad?
No, I just want to make sure that I understand, because you're asking for data and then you're moving on to another question. So I just want to make sure that I understand. You would like, of the 140 on the wait list, you would like to know by grade level, what grade level each of those students is in?
No, I just want to know how many seniors and juniors, and if of that 140, are they mostly concentrated in a particular cluster or clusters, if there's any trends along that. Because, unlike a lot of the clusters in the county, I have some schools with almost 80% of the kids are back. And so it's unlike most of the county in that way. So I just wanted, I want to know where we're at with the wait lists in District 5. A lot of my previous questions were answered, and you checked all the boxes for what I was hoping you would say with regard to bringing back various groups and into clearing those wait lists as much as possible first, before we expand the number of days. I heard in the priority groups a bunch of groups of students, all very much needing to be back 4 days a week. Are kids on 504 plans also on your radar for that targeting?
They're on our radar, but they're not part of the immediate group of students that we're targeting.
Okay. I have received a few emails, as you might imagine, about 504s and them being met or not. And so if you can keep that on your list of many lists of groups of students to come back, that would be great. The other question is about not necessarily bus capacity, but and I understand that there is no room to change that, but in my looking at that data, and it has been a little while, so I'm not sure if it's changed, there were the vast majority of buses were well under capacity. Is that still the case?
There are a number of buses that are under capacity, yes.
So there is wiggle room there. There is room to grow in that area.
Yes, and that's exactly what sort of my point I made several times so far, is that we have room to grow even at the current 6 foot, right? In the previous 6 foot recommendation of distancing in the classroom around school and on buses, we still have some room to grow. Yes.
Okay.
But that is, again, and you know this, but I'm going to say this really for the public again, it's on a case-by-case basis, right? One bus route could be running at full occupancy and the other one could have 4 or 5 students. So it's really on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. I mean, I think that's all I have at the moment. I just, from where I sit, it can't be a one size fits all, because we don't have a one size fits all now. I mean, we have some schools that have 80% of their students back. We have some schools with 20% of their students back, and everywhere in between. And so I would hate for, however we decide to carry out the remainder of the year, to be hampered by trying to do a one size fits all model. And that might not be a popular statement, but if there's room in various schools and various clusters to grow the number of students that we can reach back in buildings, by God, we should do that. And so, I mean, that's what I heard you say. And I think, and I'm really happy about that. And I think that should be, the key. And I also feel that if there's room for various clusters or various schools to go back 4 days a week, even if others can't because of spacing, I hear about equity, but there's also an inequity in not doing that and reaching those students. So a lot of what you said, I'm very much in support of, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to hear it all. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Frank? Ms. Frank, are you having trouble? Oh,
No, I just didn't hear you. Sorry.
sorry.
I do not have any questions, but I would like to introduce a motion. I am trying to construct it as I hear board members weigh in. So I apologize, but I know that we have a very short time tonight. So I just wanted to state that as we increase our focus on providing opportunity for all students, and in looking at our role through a student wellness lens that includes mental health and support, and giving families options for more in-person instruction time, this becomes an inevitable conversation. And I do trust our administrators to make decisions that best meet the needs of students and communities. And we are not trying to mandate change, but we are trying to give more options and opportunities to staff. And we understand that our focus needs to be on students who have the greatest needs. In light of the recent updates in the CDC's recommendation on physical distancing and strategy for safe school reopening, as well as the other information we have heard this evening, I move that AACPS take the necessary steps to allow families the option to send students to an in-person learning environment 4 days per week, beginning immediately in all schools where the superintendent determines this can be safely accomplished based on current enrollment and CDC guidelines for special education. I apologize. Can I restate that really quickly? In light of the recent updates in CDC guidelines, recommendations on physical distancing and strategies for safe school reopening, as well as the other information we have heard this evening, I move that AACPS take the necessary steps to allow families the option to send special education, English language learners, and any other students that have been recognized as having the greatest needs to an in-person learning environment 4 days per week, beginning immediately at all schools where the superintendent determines this can be safely accomplished based on current enrollment and CDC guidelines, while providing the highest quality instruction for those who remain virtual.
Is there a second?
Second.
I know we are short on time, so I am going to first ask, well, I'll go around, but if you don't feel a need to contribute and you know where you are, you might want to move it along. So start with Dr. Tobin.
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Corkadell,
No comment or questions.
Ms. Antwine,
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Silkworth,
I guess my only comment would be that I'm not quite sure that we really need this based upon what we've heard in terms of where we plan to go.
Mr. Smith,
Is Dr. Law, do you feel this motion gives you the leeway you need? It's not.
No,
It doesn't give you the leeway you need.
no, I don't know. I guess it depends on how you define leeway. I understand the motion. I think everything that we've talked about tonight and that I've shared is captured in terms of the spirit, maybe not exactly in the words, but in the spirit of everything that we are spelled out, our next steps are and where we're headed. With bringing more students back into school. I don't know that I don't know that the motion significantly changes anything that we are doing.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Schalheim,
For me, I want to be supportive of everything I heard tonight. And so for me, an upvote on this would show you, Dr. Arlotto, that I'm in supportive of what you've already said that you're doing. And so that's all I wanted to say. So that's how I see this. And I hope that you don't see this as us treading into your lane so much as us supporting your efforts that we heard you speak to tonight. Do you feel that way?
I just don't know I would like to think that motions are to give direction to the superintendent. And I think unless I've said something that wasn't clear, we are going to work towards priority groups of students. We've already begun to make contact to bring them in 4 days a week. That's already underway in our plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I don't have anything to ask or add. Ms. Frank, do you have anything else you want to say?
I'm going to follow up with a second motion, but just the comments that I heard tonight from board members, a couple of board members really seemed to want to segment this group. So I guess I was really just trying to capture what it seemed the feeling of the board was, along with what the recommendations of the superintendent were. It's not intended to step on toes or reiterate, but just to sort of help to collaborate that the board and the superintendent are both on the same page.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Howell?
Dr. Tobin?
In light of the fact that everything I heard tonight I'm in support of, I don't end up feeling that we need a motion, so I'm a nay.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Okay.
Mr. Smith?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my internet cut out. Worst time. But just so we're clear, we're still voting on Ms. Frank's motion as it was stated.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you all still hear me? Hello?
Yeah. Yes. Did you answer?
Hello?
Mr. Smith? Are you supporting or the motion or not?
I think he's gone.
President Ellis, in light of the technical issues, might I suggest we conclude the roll call and withhold the final call so that we can try to reestablish before concluding the vote and
Yes.
final record of it. I think if we withhold stating the final record and the final vote, that it can remain open for him.
Okay. So Mr. Smith has said he's trying to dial back in. So we will pause the voting and put the motion aside until Mr. Smith is able to rejoin. Does that work? If you have an issue, Mr. Burns, please weigh in. Otherwise, we'll proceed. In which case, I will go back to Ms. Frank.
I see Mr. Smith.
Oh, Mr. Smith, are you here?
Yes, finally.
Okay.
The internet, then the phone, now the internet.
All right. Do you have a vote on the motion that was is on the table?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Ms. Schulheim?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-2.
Now back to Ms. Frank.
My second motion that is in light of the recent updates in the CDC's recommendation on physical distancing and strategies for safe school reopening, as well as the other information we have heard this evening, I move that AACPS take the necessary steps to allow families the option to send students to an in-person learning environment 4 days per week beginning April 15th, 2021, the start of the fourth marking period, in all schools where the superintendent determines this can be safely accomplished based on current enrollment and CDC guidelines, while still providing the highest quality instruction for those who remain virtual.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Okay, so again, we've had a lot of discussion, a lot of questions answered. So I'll go around, but keep that in mind. So starting with Dr. Tobin.
I'm sorry, could I ask for the motion to be read one more time?
Absolutely.
In light of the recent updates in the CDC's recommendations on physical distancing and strategies for safe school reopening, as well as the other information we have heard this evening, I move that AACPS take the necessary steps to allow the option to send students to an in-person learning environment 4 days per week, beginning April 15th, 2021, the start of the fourth marking period, in all schools where the superintendent determines this can be safely accomplished based on current enrollment and CDC guidelines, while still providing the highest quality instruction for those who wish to remain virtual. And I did send this, but I just sent it just a few moments ago. So if you guys need to put eyes on it, I did send it out.
Again, I believe this is in accord with what we've heard from Dr. Arlato this afternoon. So I don't believe a motion is necessary. So I'm a nay.
Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, President Ellis. I don't have questions, but I do have a statement to make. Just in general, I have consistently, since day one, supported as many choices as possible for our students. I think that what the staff and under Dr. Arlato's leadership has provided is a realistic snapshot of that, as the motion has states. And I also recognize the importance of leaders coming together and showing mutual support. And I think a resolution is not quite there. I think it was adequate for us for many moments in time in the beginning. But I think us standing united behind that, affirming it by motion, I understand motions can serve multiple purposes. And I am not typically a fan of statement-based motions and have frequently said no to them for that purpose. But reopening is clearly unique. And I think now where divides are so frequent in our society that it's important for us to recognize the unity that we can present as leaders. And so we can't control CDC. We cannot control how many buses we can roll out. We cannot control the State Board of Education. There are many things that we don't have the power to control. But I think that us showing that we support what we do have a role in, and the board clearly does have a role in these matters on reopening. I see that it is capturing the provisions of the spirit and intent. I would hope that the staff would not interpret it, nor the residents, as a mantra of a mandate. And it was carefully languaged, wordsmithed as such. I also understand that sometimes people do misinterpret those as a mandate. And so I'm just going to say out loud, I'm not voting as a mandate, but voting to show my support and continued team effort for our moving forward. Everything I heard seems like it is meeting our needs. And I think affirming that out loud in a motion is appropriate in this case. If not in reopening, the largest decision of our school board, considering all that we do affirm along the way, I think this is probably the biggest one. So I will be a yes, and will continue to support the spirit and intent of the motion that it is designed for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corkadell. Ms. Antwine.
Thank you, President Ellis. So for Ms. Frank, are you recommending that a survey go back out? How do you envision families letting Dr. Arundel and his
you cut out a little bit, but what I was suggesting is that Dr. Arlotto would determine which schools could have increased enrollment, and then however he determines is best in order to get some of those students at Fort Bay would be under his purview.
Ms. Antwine, you still, is that all? Mr. Silkworth?
Yes, I think Dr. Arlotto clearly stated where we need to go and how we need to get there. I think we really need. We've allowed our parents to have choices about whether they wanted to stay at home, whether they wanted 2 days. We've met the needs of our special needs children as we move forward toward the end of the year. Earlier, I talked about those 3 C's: consistency, change. We've gotten lots of emails from many of our teachers and parents that have said, please, no more change. They need to be able to, many people have said that they need to be able. We just completed the first cycle of getting everybody back. And people need to be able to deal with that and to move forward. And our teachers and students need to be able to do the great things that they do. I just, again, I think that the vision that has been set forth, I think is a good one for our students. I just don't think I can support this for the reasons that I've stated and earlier. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oh, sorry, I got lost. Am I at Mr. Smith, right?
Once again, Dr. Law, do you feel like this motion will tie your hands?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Much more so than the previous, right? So the previous motion, if I understand it correctly, is focusing on the special needs students and getting them in 4 days a week as we deem appropriate. I have yet to see the second motion in writing, but now that I've heard it read a couple of times, it will absolutely tie our hands, because now I'm going to have competing groups. I'm going to be working on 4 days a week for special groups, and then basically a motion is a mandate. You're now mandating me and my staff to open up to 4 days a week. That's in essence what I'm hearing. I haven't been able to see it in writing yet, but that's what I'm hearing. Now I'm going to have competing issues of, am I focusing on the students 4 days a week that are in the greatest need, or does this outweigh, the second motion outweigh that? And I've got to focus on the needs of all the general students and getting them in 4 days a week, despite the fact that we've got issues that are that we have yet to figure out and overcome, like transportation, if I then begin to open things up for folks. So this is a, I don't know how to balance this second motion with the first motion.
Thank you, Dr. Law. And I just forwarded you the motion. I don't know if you can see that, but President Ellis, if we could give Dr. Law a chance to, read it over, and then could you come back to me so I could just ask him the question once again once he has read the motion?
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Schalheim?
I have to get off the line in a second. It is Passover, but for the reasons some of my colleagues have already stated, I am a nay on this one. Thank you.
And I believe I'm the last one to speak before we end with Ms. Frank, but we'll go back to Mr. Smith real quickly afterwards. Look, I've been saying it throughout this pandemic. The default should always be to have our classrooms open to our students whenever and however possible. It's a virus that shut down our schools. If the CDC is saying that that we can and should have students in the classroom as much as possible, and that's why the elementary school level is so much more lenient than the middle and high school. We've seen the test scores. I mean, not test scores. Sorry, grades. The report that came out with MSDE last week. We cannot identify all of those struggling students because we hear from parents all the time who are telling us how their students are struggling, but they're not. It's not necessarily reflected in their grades. But this has had a horrendous effect on our students' development, social, emotional, academic, everything. I don't see these as competing motions. I see the first motion saying prioritize these students and then open up in every way possible the option to the rest of our students. And so that's I think the basis for how I can support this. For those who have been writing and saying, please no more change, no one is taking your options away from you. But we have families who are in great need to have their students in the classroom. This opens up opportunities for some of our most struggling high schools who could probably add more have students in 4 days a week with such low numbers, even with the 6-foot rule. You know, when I look through the CDC website, I see phased mitigation strategies, layered, when possible, is riddled throughout there. We do everything we can to keep our students safe, and then we provide them the opportunity for an education. With that being said, I certainly am in support. Back to Mr. Smith. Dr. Arlotto, do you have anything to add? I believe, or Mr. Smith, you can go ahead now.
After reading your answer.
Yeah, my answer is the same. I feel this is now a competing motion that we're going to focus on the needs of those priority need students and work to get them back in the classroom 4 days a week.
Okay, but and just quickly, I know the motion, it says as you deem fit and where you see we can safely accomplish this. Doesn't that put the power in your hands?
Sort of.
Could you elaborate on that?
Oh, the board makes a motion to make a mandate and to direct the superintendent's work. So while the terminology says that as you are saying, the superintendent and staff have the power, that's not how many people will read it. And you will hear from constituents who will say, the board directed you to do this, Dr. Arlotto, and now you're not doing it. Right? So the board directed me also some time ago to provide as much teleworking opportunities to staff as possible, which we have done. And now that does, and while the right thing to do, it does limit our ability to expand. That's one of the issues of expanding to 4 days a week, is do we have the staff available to work 4 days a week? I shouldn't say work 4 days a week. That's not appropriate because they are working, but they're working remotely. That's an issue. And this has a date of April 15th, which ties my hands because my first priority was to focus on priority groups. As I said, we're going to start to get them in post Easter spring break, but I don't know that we'll have all those groups in by the 15th.
I got that. And I guess you wouldn't want us to wordsmith this to make it like, more of a resolution, not a mandate. You'd probably just want yourself to have as free reign as possible, correct?
Sure. That's what superintendents live for.
No. And the reason I asked this question, because, I go to Meade High School, right? And like we all know, this less than 25% is going back to the school. I see where there is at my school, right, where I'm coming from, there is the possibility to bring students back 4 days a week. I know other schools like Severna Park, Broadneck, and those clusters, not so much, right? They just have way too many kids all the way already in the building. And for me, I just want to make sure that I just want the public to be aware that you're not just gonna not do anything, right? No matter what gets passed, right? You're still going to, you and your team, as you have always done, you're gonna take, I guess, every basically leave no stone unturned, right? You're gonna, look at every possibility to bring, an increased number of students back first and foremost, and then increase the number of days students are going back, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. So I guess after hearing all that, the motion, the intent of the motion is to support you, right? And we all support you, but we know that some people in the community are going to take it as, we have to do it. We have to do it. If you don't do it, you're failing the kids, right? You're not doing what the board told you, when in fact the motion is stated where it gives you leeway. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So I guess I'm really just thinking all this out right now, because like I said, I'm coming from a place where I know some schools can do it. And I know that this motion says that, but what the public sees. So I guess, Dr. Law, I trust you. I trust you and the team. So I guess I'm just gonna really, leave it all up to you. So I guess, we'll let the vote come out. But thank you, President Ellis.
Sure, and I'm sorry. I meant to offer a friendly amendment and, see if it's amenable, but April 19th is a Monday. Gives a little more time and breathing room. I know the fourth quarter starts on April 15th, but that's a Thursday. Would that be acceptable? Ms. Frank, I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I said yes. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear. Okay. Sorry, I've got, I'm just checking. A member got booted off the call. Oh, I believe she's back. Okay. Okay. All right. So I think we're good. Ms. Howell. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Frank, I go back to you. I did not give you.
That's okay. In the interest of time, I'll just say that, just trying to give folks as many choices as possible and let them know that we're in alignment with where we need to go, and just sort of articulate to the public that, not everyone can watch these 2-hour meetings. And when Dr. Arlotto says he's working towards XYZ, sometimes I feel that a motion captures that better than a very lengthy board meeting. So I really want to acknowledge that, no, we're not going to be bringing students back, in every school for every student 5 days a week. And obviously I'm not suggesting that that's what this motion represents, but I absolutely do want to just ensure to the public that we are bringing back as many students as Dr. Arlotto is able to do in as soon a timeline as we are able. And it's sort of our promise to the public that we're continuing to do that.
Okay, Ms. Howell.
Dr. Tobin.
Nay.
Ms. Corkadell.
Aye.
Ms. Antwine.
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth.
Hey,
Mr. Smith.
Nay.
And Ms. Schalheim had to leave. Ms. Frank.
Aye.
And Ms. Ellis.
Aye.
5-4, motion passes.
Five, four. Sorry. I think the count
Sorry,
was
it's
wrong.
Ellis?
It's 5-3. My apologies.
No,
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 Ms.
yes.
no,
Schalheim
it's
didn't vote.
4-4, motion fails. I
Sorry.
believe.
I believe
Ms.
it's
Frank,
4-3.
Ms. Corkadell, Ms. Antwine, Ms. Ellis. That's 4-3 would be Mr. Silkworth, Mr. Smith, and Dr. Tobin. My apologies.
Correct.
President Ellis,
Yes.
in light of the failed motion, I would like to offer a resolution.
Okay.
And I'm winging this, so I'll just ask if there is there's a problem, let me know. But I really do feel it's important that we show unity, and I am a little disappointed that we weren't able to come to language that made that possible. But I think we can resolve as a board to I move that the board resolve makes the following resolution. I so move that the board expresses full support for the superintendent's presented choices that are proposed and in progress to expand hybrid opportunities to as many students as possible, and that and further that the Board of Education request that we continue to do so with haste for as many students as possible prior to the conclusion of the school year. Please don't ask me to repeat that. I
Second.
literally did that off the top of my head. But basically, yeah.
Ms. Howell, were you able to capture that?
Or should I mean, if we can stand for a minute, I can try to retype it, but
Well, I can read to you what I've captured, but I know I missed a section. So
Okay.
I have: the board expresses full support for the superintendent's presented choices that are proposed and expressed opportunities. I missed the middle. And further, that the Board of Education do that not in haste, or do that in haste for as many students as possible for the rest of the school year.
President
So
Ellis, if I may, if we could stand at ease for like as long as it would take me to type it, and I can get that over to Ms. Howell and the members, as long as it takes me to type an email.
Okay. Just, I'm just going to ask everyone to hang tight. We did promise a short meeting.
I'm sorry.
So I'm just going to, yeah.
I honestly
so in other
didn't-
words, I'm not going to call a full recess.
Yeah. No. I was just asking for a brief stand at ease because I honestly didn't think that I thought, anyways. Okay. Thank you. Give me 1 minute here.
President Ellis, also, if it helps, I pulled up the replay on my phone. I don't know if you want me to play that in the speaker or let Ms. Corkadell just continue to type it.
I'm going to clean it up and as I'm typing a little bit.
I will unmute. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Yeah, I think Ms. Corkadell maybe wants to write it more succinctly now that she's typing, but thank you.
President Ellis, I want to thank you and my fellow members and colleagues and staff for entertaining. I don't think it's absolutely perfect in my version of perfect, but I do believe it captures what I had intended, which was to, number one, move this to a resolution. And that, wait a second, it looks like I have an error, hold on. In one of them, let me see if that fixes it. Okay. Not sure, hold on one second. I'm having an issue with the send. It keeps coming up with an error. Okay, I think I found the problem. Sorry. Let's try that again. Okay. My sincere apologies. So as I said, my goal is to, it sounded like this was maybe a little too strong of a statement. And although I disagree with the interpretation, I do recognize the need to, for varying comfort. So I'm proposing a resolution instead of a motion that calls out the affirmation. And Dr. Arlato, I believe you're included on this. I'm going to reread this into the record, Ms. President Ellis, if you would like. And Ms. Howell has a copy as well. Let it hereby be resolved that the Board of Education fully supports the plans outlined during the meeting of March 30th, 2021, whereby it was advised that as many choices as possible will be acted upon to add additional hybrid opportunities for both 2-day and 4-day choices within the most recent CDC guidelines, and recognizing the operational, hiring, and health issues that exist, and that it occur as soon as possible. That is the motion, President Ellis.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Corkadell. Any discussion starting with Dr. Tobin?
Sorry, I'm just rereading it here. Requiring and recognizing the operational, hiring, and health issues that exist. Okay, all right, no, it's clear, thank you, no questions.
Ms. Antwine?
I only have a question about, I understand the motion was interpreted as a mandate, even though clarification was shared. How would the resolution, what would the resolution be doing outside of saying we support what Dr. Arlato has said as the manager of the schools? I'm not understanding why we need the record. All of our votes indicated that we're supporting Dr. Arlato in this. So I'm trying to understand the need for the resolution.
President Ellis, if you would like, I'm willing to respond.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just making sure we follow the formalities.
I'm sorry. Thank you for
No, don't apologize. I was just making sure that our president is recognized in her authority. My answer is that number one, it was a motion and it has failed. So we did not have a majority of that. And that is where my concern is. I do not, likewise, for the same and similar reasons that Dr. Arlato pointed out of interpretation, we are now have a motion that had indicated support to the superintendent that has failed. I think ultimately, I remain committed to the importance of us being co-supportive of one another's efforts. and do not want the votes, the failed motion to also have an indication that could be detrimental to people's trust in their school system and trust that we are working together for everybody's best interest. And I thought that the best compromise would be a resolution by which we are making a statement. That's what resolutions do, is say that we have a position. And the position that I am proposing, I am proffering to my colleagues tonight, is a support of the superintendent and a recognition of the challenges that he is thusly facing, as well as our interest of timely support, timely delivery of what as much as we can, which is obviously what we have been doing along. But I think based on our practice of having motions and resolutions in this category, that this would perhaps clean up that now new negativity that was created as a result. Did that answer your question, Ms. Antoine?
Well, thank you. What I'm understanding, that because the motion that would have, for lack of a better term, it would have done the support that this resolution is doing. You're introducing a resolution, which is the statement rather than the perceived mandate, so that the public understands support it.
Yes, correct. Yes, you're correct. One is an action, one is a statement. And that is why they are different enough also to be heard at the same time.
I believe with this meeting in itself is an indication of how important this is to us as the board overall. I believe all of our members have emphasized our support to educating our students, especially those who are clearly struggling in the current status quo environment. I plan to support the resolution as I did the motion, but I want to make it very clear to everyone listening, this is in support of our school system and he who leads it, which is Dr. Arlotto, for the best interest of our students. Our students have to be educated. They are demonstrating that the education right now is in jeopardy, and whatever it takes to ensure that they get the proper education, I support. Thank you.
Mr. Silkworth.
Well, the resolution is clearly different than the motion that failed. So I clearly am in support, and I've said that, and I think most of our board members have said the same thing, that we are in support of the work that Dr. Lott and his staff have already done in terms of where we are and where we need to go based upon the mission statement that we have. So this is clearly, again, not the same as the motion. I can certainly probably support this because it's just reaffirming our support for all of the plans that we've heard this evening, which do include efforts to be able to get as many of our students back, whether it's 2 days for those that are not back, or 4 days for those that are back 2 days. I think I think that's important. So having said that, I'm not quite sure we need the resolution, but I think I could vote for this.
Where are we? We are Mr. Smith.
Thank you, President. Dr. Arlo, like I asked you before, before, we all know resolutions are supposed to support a cause or support someone. So this resolution, just, so I asked, will it support you, or do you feel like it's going to add more pressure?
No, it doesn't add any more pressure.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, and I keep getting lost. Ms. Frank?
I have a couple comments that I kind of didn't say the last time around. So since we're not as, I guess, pressed for time as I thought we were, I did want to say that one concern that I've had is that there have been a lot of changes this year, and there have been, and everyone's life has changed in some way. And when people say that, you know, we should stop change just for that sake, I think about our kindergarten students, where 20% of their life is their year of kindergarten already. So I know that even if we could give them a short time, a short window of learning in their accelerated learning time, that's significant for them. And I think it's worth getting as many kids back as we possibly can in any situation. And if it's one school over another, then it's as many kids as we can get into a building. And I support any effort to continue with that. I do want to say, in the spirit of unity and some of the things that I think Ms. Corgadell is trying to accomplish with this resolution, that every day is an incredible honor to serve with the members of this board and Dr. Arlotto. And in the short time that I've been here, we've tackled some extremely challenging issues with compassion, grace, thoughtfulness, and I believe teamwork. And I will continue to support that mission. Thank you.
So I think a little bit to piggyback off what Ms. Frank just said, you know, just briefly, I have disagreed with every single board member I've ever served with. I've certainly disagreed with Dr. Arlotto at times. That does not imply a lack of unity. I support every decision the board has made. And I haven't voted in favor of every decision the board has made. And so I hope that what I have to say is not received. I hope everyone understands the spirit in which I'm saying this. Of course, I support Dr. Arlotto. I made that very clear. I believe I even gave a speech about it in our last public meeting. I don't support where we're going right now. I feel that we don't have time to slow walk getting students in. I'll say again and again and again, the only thing that should keep a child from the classroom in this pandemic is the pandemic. And when the CDC says we can move forward more, then that's what we do right away. So for that reason, I cannot support this resolution because I have to, I have to take a position for our students and in this case. And so again, it's not a lack of unity with the board. It is not a lack of support in our superintendent. It's just not supporting the direction we're taking on this issue. And Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, President Ellis, and I appreciate the candor. There was a lot that I was going to say that Ms. Antwine said very well. We have as a board considered Ms. Frank's motion. I supported it. It did not receive 5 votes. What remains is a very big now dangling participle in my mind to the public, because a 4-3 vote that was where the majority of the debate centered around Dr. Arlotto, this is a support motion for you, I think leaves a gray cloud in an otherwise continuing storm of COVID. And we have made resolutions like this that have greatly benefited our students and moved the mark and moved the ball. And this is not, in my opinion, an all or nothing. Each and every single time we make the strides, we take the steps. And there's a time for principled action. And there's also a time to remind everybody that we are together. And I believe that that is what this does. This allows our board to continue to consider similar motions in the future to Ms. Frank. And I think most importantly, allows us to conclude a meeting knowing that we recognize what has been presented and what could possibly happen. And yes, as leaders, we're going to have to try to encourage that more get done, because it is in everybody's best interest. And I don't think the staff or Dr. Arlotto or members who chose to vote, whether it be for or against Ms. Frank's motion, would have done that. And I'm only referencing this in a limited capacity. I know that that's usually a no, but that is how the origin of this came to be. And so I think it's important that we understand the history of how we got here. And so upon conclusion of that vote, it occurred to me that I think we do need to end on what I thought would be a unified, and I respect if not, but I would just ask you to consider that regardless of the outcome of this vote, we have opportunities to continue to have these conversations. We have a still ongoing mandate of this board to receive reopening updates and have the purview of, based upon that information, continuing those motions. In the here and now, I think I would prefer leaving this meeting telling my constituents that this is at least what we know we can do. And I think saying at least this is what we know we can do is how we were able to accelerate it so quickly, and how we would have been able to accelerate and meet those needs. So I just would encourage everyone to think of it perhaps with a different twist of not about how you feel about 4 days, 5 days, everybody, nobody, choices, no choices, but rather to recognize the language that I chose and take it for its face value, and that tomorrow is a new day, and we'll have many more opportunities to continue this conversation. And we do meet next week. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Howell.
Dr. Tobin?
I just want to say briefly, I want to thank Dr. Arlotto again for what he presented tonight. I think he and the team are actually moving as prudently and expeditiously as they can. I vote yes to this resolution.
Ms. Corkadell?
Yes.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Nay.
6-1, motion passes.
Okay. So I think we've been through every member. So I think that's going to conclude the meeting this evening. We'll be meeting again noon, I believe, on April 7th. And thanks, everyone.